Dave, we're back, and great to see you. And yeah, this is like number three in like 6 months or something. So it's great to have you back on the show, mate.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you for inviting me yet one more time, Daniel.
Absolutely. Well, the last time, for the listeners that haven't listened to our rip on, I titled it "The Forest is My Mentor" after your essay and your Toastmaster speech. And that got a lot of good feedback. People are drawing these connections the same as you are and really appreciating your work on this and your your ability to geek out on single-celled fungi is
Yeah.
unparalleled, I would say, in the space. And Lauren sat through that whole 2 hour interview, and I was just explaining to you that she's been inspired now to start a biology and animal husbandry course at the local college. So that you're inspiring many people, Dave.
It's good to hear. It's always you always feel like you're kind of yelling out into the void, and it's hard as much as all of the infrastructure around us for potential feedback, and it's like you just don't get any. And when you do, it's sort of like, it's like a nice confirmation that you're not actually screaming out into the void and no, you're not the crazy person ranting on a soapbox on the corner of, Main and High.
Yes. So I forwarded Lauren your Forest Walkers article or essay,
Okay.
and she's been reading through it,
A
and
little bit.
yes, and liking the pictures, obviously the
Mm-hmm.
AI
Mm-hmm.
inspired pictures, and
Yeah.
I wanted to dig into this because it's a real fun one. It's sci-fi, but totally plausible at the same time if you have the imagination. And if you're down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you're probably going to realize this as we talk through it. But you called it Forest Walker, Bitcoin
Right.
mining and forest management, and I'll link this obviously article in the show notes so people can go and read it and look at the cool pictures you've got there. But what do you think, Lauren? What's kind of piquing your interest here, and what's the question you want to throw at Dave?
I was wondering what your favorite Forest Walker invention was and like what it would do.
Like the system as the whole, or like because there's like a few moving parts that go along with that. So are you asking about like inside those moving parts, which one of those is my favorite, or just what is it about this whole thing that I'm liking?
What is it about this whole thing?
Okay. The thing that I like about it the most is that it's ridiculously over the top. It is borderline insane. And that's sort of the way that I approach it because when I was coming up with this idea, it just kept rolling around in my head. And it's one of those things where after a while it gets to the point where if you don't get it out of you, it has this tendency to rattle around and it's not that it would ever do any like real damage, but after a while you get kind of like uh distracted. And the best way to pull that to get to a point where you're not distracted by a thing in your head, the best thing to do is to write it down. And my wife has been instructing people at the secondary or higher education level on how to construct arguments and how to write for years. And we both recognize that one of the best ways to functionally think, to really think, is to actually write something down because it forces you to look at what it is that you're thinking about. And then you can start recognizing all the problems and you start trying to correct those problems. And so it was my favorite part of this was the actual decision to say, it needs to get out of my head. It needs to go on paper or in this case, into a digital format. And I've really got to wrap my head around it because there are elements that it could work. there's other elements where it's problematic. And I like, even though that it's out of my head and it's into like a digital format, I still recognize that there's issues about it that I have to think through. So it's that exercise of making something more tangible than just keeping it all inside your head. So that's actually my favorite part.
Did your wife read it?
Yeah, she's read it, and my sister's read it, and of course they're nowhere close to as down the rabbit
I
hole as
was
I
gonna say, mate.
am.
This is
But I mean,
this
you
is
know,
an
it's
out there wild one, right? For somebody that has not does not know where we're coming from with this. This is yeah, that it's going to send them cross-eyed. And did they love the AI pictures? Because I think they're so cool. I
Mhm.
mean, they are like cypherpunk, steampunk, excellent. Yeah, it's so fun.
well, that was sort of like the other part that was kind of fun about doing this paper was doing the artwork and trying to, because when you're not an artist, and I am not an artist, I am just not. I can't draw my way out of a paper bag with holes in it. So having to work with AI back and forth, those took hours to do to get them right. And even then, there's a couple of them that I still don't like, but at one point you have to stop. You have to just put it out there. Otherwise, it just doesn't actually exist unless somebody else sees it. So, but the pictures, the header picture is my favorite because it really does bring it really it's like it's sort of like, oh, I kind of get what you're saying. And I did kind of want it to be a little scary because there's an element of fear in this entire thing. If you were to run across one of these in the forest, you just walking around minding your own business and you see this thing, especially with the noise that it would actually be generating, it wouldn't be that pleasant of an experience. I don't think.
Yeah, that was the thing in my brain. It's like if I saw that in a forest, I'll be running out. Like,
Yeah. Well, you it's hard to compare. I,
mm,
I I would wager we couldn't even really class what we have in England as a forest. We would have
no,
we would have woodlands.
yeah,
But if you were to look into United States and other huge land masses where these forests are so vast, and they do need some kind of management, otherwise we have the
forest
awful
fires.
forest
Yeah,
fires, which is another part of this whole story,
Right.
which is really cool. So let's kick this off. Let's not go esoteric to begin with. Let's go. This is easily achievable, and I'm talking about you've got a lumber yard or a timber yard. You can mine Bitcoin using your waste products, or here
Mhm.
you're talking about the gasification process and using a gasifier. Now, I've seen this on YouTube where
Yeah.
people are making these things and producing electricity from it. So let's just talk about like this is totally 100% plausible to mine Bitcoin off of waste products in a timber yard and get using gasification. So let's go there, Dave, and get people on an even keel to begin with.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's the entire heart of the system is, where does the energy come from? That and honestly, that's the question that like, how do when you're driving your car, where does the energy come from? When you fly a plane, if you're going somewhere, energy is involved in everything that you do. So if we look at it from just like a first principle standpoint, if we're talking about not only Bitcoin mining, but all the systems on the Forest Walker system to begin with, all of it takes energy. So the very beating heart of the system is how to answer the question, where does the energy come from? And this kind of goes back to, if you remember, Lauren, the last time that we talked, I talked about the Carboniferous period when there was no fungi that was able to actually degrade trees and wood. So that's how we ended up with coal. And part of that discussion was the fact that all the energy that is used on this earth, no matter what source it's from, came from either, well, actually did come from our sun, or came from elements that were already present when our sun formed. And that covers nuclear energy. So like plutonium, that didn't come from our sun. That was kind of already here when our sun formed. Different deal. But oil, natural gas, coal, wood that you burn now, all of that energy is stored energy from our sun combined with carbon dioxide and water. It is really that simple. It does. If you turn on the light switch, you're actually using solar energy, whether or not it's generated from burning coal or solar panels, right? So in the forest walker system, it utilizes a very not dense fuel source. Like coal, that's dense. Oil, very, very dense. Packs a lot of energy in a very small space. Wood, not so much. It's that's just the way it is. So when we're talking about the what's called the gasification process, we start going, okay, what has to happen? And during the process, what is actually occurring to get and harvest this energy? Because I could burn the wood just pile it up in a pile and light it on fire, but that doesn't direct the energy to do anything. I need the energy to be funneled into something that does a thing, right? And just warming myself by the fire isn't going to run a machine. So, one of the ways that we can harvest the energy out of wood is through the gasification process, which all it does is it burns wood in a very low oxygen or no oxygen environment. So what has to happen is like in a the gasifiers I'm used to looking at, you chip the wood first. You don't just throw in whole logs. It's got to be some kind of uniform size, like, I don't know, 3 inches, like maybe a fist size or smaller, but not too small. And then you pack it into what's called a retort. I don't know why they use that word. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it is called a retort. It's just the chamber that the wood is going to be gasified inside of. An external heat source has to be used to heat up the wood that's inside that chamber that's in a low oxygen or no oxygen environment. Once it gets hot enough, elements in the wood turn to gas, specifically carbon monoxide, methane, and hydrogen gas. Did you Have you ever seen the pictures of the Hindenburg when it exploded back in the 30s?
No.
It was airships back then. They didn't use helium to be lighter than air. They used hydrogen. And if you look at the Hindenburg disaster, you will see just how ignitable hydrogen gas is. It's a spectacular burn rate, right? So it's not anything to sneeze at. Carbon monoxide, it's CO. We're used to people talking about CO2, carbon dioxide, but carbon monoxide, what people don't give it credit for is the fact that it as a gas is also extremely flammable. Methane, that's natural gas, clearly flammable. So all three of these gases come out of the wood when they're heated to about, I don't know, you start getting up to 400 degrees C, 300 degrees C to 600 degrees C, the wood actually starts to gas. It gasifies. It starts stripping off and becomes single molecules of this hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and then the methane that's in the wood. If you can think about it like this, because everybody knows that wood burns, but what's burning? Is it the wood that's burning? It's actually not. Wood is it's a it's an interesting bag of cats is the only way that I can put it. So if you burn a candle, this is the best way that I found to describe what's going on. If you if you burn a candle, what are you actually burning? Are you burning the wick? So
Mm.
like what, Laura, what do you think? Like if you're burning a candle, if you've got like a taper or just like, like a little tea candle or something like that, what's actually on fire? Is it the wick or is it something else?
Do you know what the wick is?
Yeah.
Yep.
So is it like a different gas then?
Well, what's actually burning is the wax.
Oh.
You're burning the wax because what's happening is that you light the wick on fire and it burns for just a little bit, just enough to melt the wax. The wax starts going up the wick and then it hits that burn area and it immediately starts to gasify. What's in that wax as it turns to gas is actually what you're seeing as the flame. The wick, the wick itself doesn't really actually burn. It's just a way to convey the fuel. So if you look at a wood fiber and you like take a little splinter from a piece of wood and you light the end of it, it's in fact kind of doing the same thing. The carbon at the very tip that's burned that looks black is hot enough that it starts to gasify the chemistry in the wood around it. And what's actually burning is the gasified, well, the gases that are coming out of the local gasification process right around that burning tip. So if you extend that to every single cubic centimeter of wood mass, that's what's going on when wood is burning. It's like a candle burning from every direction all at once. But it's doing the same thing. But when you're burning wood, you're not actually burning wood because wood is a combination of carbon and all these other chemistries that when they get hot enough, they break up into these three flammable gases. And then that's what burns until it's burned out and the only thing left is carbon. And that's when we get into the to biochar. So in the forest walker system, you have essentially a singular robot that's I keep thinking of it as the size of a Volkswagen. And its purpose is to continuously feed itself with the very fuel that it's using to convert into these gases that are then burned in a combustion engine, like like a chainsaw engine or like a small car engine. Just it acts like gasoline. If you convert the engine over to be and which is an easy conversion, instead of taking something like natural gas, it just takes in this what's called syngas, which is the combination of hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and methane. And that's the product of the gasification process is called syngas. You just feed it into an engine and that engine will work like any other internal combustion engine works, which means that you can turn an electric generator with it. And that's the other part of the forest walker system. So there's essentially like three parts to the forest walker system is that it ingests wood and then it gasifies that wood and then it takes the product of that gasification process to an internal combustion engine and then that internal combustion engine drives an electric generator which powers all the rest of the systems like hydraulics, computers, how it looks and sees the world, how it interacts with everything else because most of the systems on the forest walker itself is actually going to be electrically driven. So you need the electron flow to be able to run those systems. Just so happens that if there's any extra electricity left over, and my theory is that there will be, then you can drive Bitcoin mining with the leftovers. And the whole point of building this system is how do you make the system itself use the least amount of energy so that you can have the maximum amount of energy left over and available for Bitcoin mining as it's going through performing its job and duties in the forest.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It
Yeah, kind of. It's a lot to take in.
The pictures help.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So anybody listening need to go and look at the pictures. So if I was to say, just forget about the forest walkers at the time, right now. We'll get onto those. If you've got a lumber yard, you could literally have a gasification machine set up right there, manually feed it yourselves after you've chipped all of the dead wood, branches, bark, all of the, if you go to if no one's ever, if you're not aware, the byproduct is a hell of a lot of sawdust and chips, like mountains. Absolutely mountains. And I know this because I got two friends that own lumber yards, and it's one of their biggest problems. Like, what the hell do we do with this stuff? And now it's like, well, guys, you could be like running a gasification process and minting Bitcoin, mining, excuse me, at the same time. Yeah. So this is totally plausible. That 100% could just be sat there being fed manually all day long by a dude. So we'll get onto the robot stuff in a second. So if you've got a guy there with a shovel, just putting that in, and that's his job, great. You're mining Bitcoin using the sawdust. You've turned a waste product into something that is profitable. The next step up from that would be to get some kind of robot to do that. And that could be very basic shovel robot or whatever. So we've not gone esoteric there at all. That is 100% available for people to do if they so wished. This technology is not new.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this. That's one of the reasons why I chose for the artwork that you guys were talking about. I chose steampunk, and there's a reason that I chose the theme. This particular technology, if I go back and I'm actually looking at the paper right now, and I want to get to this part. Where was it? Oh, good Lord. Hold on. I hate this. Like I just had it. I wanted to find the actual date, and it looks like I'm not actually going to find it. Good Lord. Okay. Well, I'm just going to have to wing it. Well before 1800. I mean, one of the first guys that started playing around with gasification, you're talking about the 1700s. This is extreme. This isn't old technology. This is ancient technology. Now, it never got to the point where it started getting any kind of traction until essentially World War II. And by the time the end of World War II occurred, because of rationing of petroleum products in Germany at the time, there were close to 500,000 vehicles. We're talking cars, not lorries, not big, not tanks, just regular people's cars. 500,000 of them were running on gasifiers. They had been retrofitted or built straight up from the ground up as a gasification car, and it was just normal. It was just normal to see a wood burning car. And believe me when I say this, when I first saw or heard about gasification, I really did think it was just a bunch of hooey. I really did. I was like, there's no way that you can tell me that you can put a log of wood into a fireplace mounted on a car and drive the car around. And that really, my not understanding that was simple ignorance, because I just didn't realize what gasification was. Now that I've seen it, and I'm absolutely convinced beyond any shadows or shades of a doubt that it works, all of a sudden you can start thinking about, where can I use this? And what else can it do? And there's a lot of stuff that the gasification process actually leaves behind in its wake, which we'll probably get to later. But the whole point is, we have an immense amount of the least dense energy source on this planet, and it's everywhere. At least, like you said, you guys don't really have any forest anymore. Uh, you know, the the Isles used to be carpeted in massive forests. Not anymore, but it is what it is. There are other forests, and like here in the West, Western United States, these forests are immense. I mean, just they're like just in the West, in the United States, from the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific coast, from Canada down to Mexico, you're talking about like 10, I don't know. It
Well, I've
seems to
just
me it'd
I've
be
just
like,
asked AI. I've just asked Venice AI, the
yeah,
largest forest in the USA. The largest forest in the USA is the Tongass. Have I said that right? Anyway,
I don't
Tong,
know. I've actually not heard that word.
Tongass. Wow, they're telling us gasification right there. Anyway,
Oh,
to,
really?
yeah, Tongass National Forest, located in southeast Alaska. It spans approximately
Okay.
16.7 million acres, making it the largest
Uh-huh.
national forest in the United States. Wow.
Yeah, it's
16.7 million acres.
yeah. And every single year, all year long, dead branches and detritus is falling out of the trees and landing on the ground. And for the most part, because we do have fungus, if it's wet enough, then a lot of that wood has no problem decomposing down into elements that can be used by all the soil critters, which we talked about last time. But in drier climates like the Rocky Mountains, which is essentially a desert, it doesn't make sense, but many parts of the Rocky Mountains are indeed a desert because you classify a desert as to how much rainfall it gets. These forests can get dry, and as long as it's dry, microbial activity is squelched, which means essentially that it just doesn't really occur, and the wood just sits there and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up until something catches it on fire, and it will catch on fire. I mean, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, and how bad is that fire going to be? And it all boils down to the fact that if you've got, wood everywhere and it's dry as a bone, it's going to catch on fire. And if there's enough of it, it's going to get hot enough that it kills the trees that are living around it. And this is the difference between there's there's forest fires and then there's forest fires. And most when, before this hemisphere was populated by humans, forest fires burned all the time. It burned every year. It burned everything down, except it never got hot enough to kill many of the trees. Sometimes it would happen, but not like we see today. So why is it different now? And there's only one reason, and that's what's called the fuel load. The fuel load is way higher now than it used to be because before there were people here, the fires would just burn and they would burn all the fuel off the forest floor. And then more fuel would accumulate, over the next decade. And then there would be enough wood so that another forest fire would burn, but it could never get hot enough to boil the sap in giant sequoia trees and make them explode or catch on fire themselves. And that's the difference. A forest fire should burn everything off the ground and some of the limbs that are actually off of the living tree because those trees are armored, right? You gotta get really hot to start getting through those layers of bark and into the living tissue of the tree before it starts doing damage. And even though it looks bad, it's like, look, oh my God, Dad, the pine tree's on fire. Unless it's on fire all the way to the top of the tree, it's probably not going to hurt it. So it clears out all the underbrush. It kills all, like if it's a diseased bush or it's like a small tree that's not doing well, it takes it all out. And then in the United States, our policies changed around the 1930s. We didn't allow forest fires. We didn't like them. And so the policy of the United States Department of Agriculture was immediately, we cannot let forest fires burn. And they put out everything that they saw. They would not let a forest fire burn for decades. And all the time, the fuel is building up and it's building up and it's building up. And then you get the first real disaster, which was the Yellowstone forest fire in the 1980s, wiped that entire forest out. And that was when people started looking at our fire policies. And that's part of what I was thinking about when the forest walker started kind of getting in my head.
Yes, and we'll get to those. Unfortunately, Lauren has to run. She's got to go help her mother with
Yeah.
something. So she can't stay the whole time this time. So,
Yeah.
well,
Oh, dude. Oh, well, bye, Lauren. It was
Yeah.
nice seeing you again, though.
Yeah, it was nice seeing you too, and thank you for all this information.
yeah.
Now I understand.
You're welcome. More,
So-
there's more to come. Don't worry about it.
There certainly is. So, yeah, the Yellowstone Forest Fire National Park was a history, 1988. During that summer, a combination of lightning, drought, and human activity caused fires to scorch more than 1/3 of the park, affecting a total of 793,880 acres, or 36% of the park's entire area. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, the most recent disaster would be the Palisades, right? The
Right.
fire in California.
Right.
So, forest walkers. Then let's put a picture in people's heads. What you've envisaged your steampunk thing is very, very cool. It looks like think of kind of like a fire breathing dragon or a big mammoth or something, but it's in steampunk form that is running a gasification chamber inside of its unit. And your argument being Boston Dynamics, they've probably got one of these laying around somewhere. You know, this isn't as sci-fi as people think. You've got Boston Dynamics making all these kind of things that can easily just be set off to walk around, self-powered through a 1,000,000-acre forest, and as it's going through that forest, using LiDAR to find itself the fuel on the floor, which is the broken limbs, which need clearing out anyway, especially in dry areas. They would then ingest that through a chipper, self-load it through a chipper, make the biomass into that inch by inch size wood that it needs, feed the gasification chamber, use that energy to power itself with the computers and whatever else it needs on board to be running, and the excess energy gets diverted to an ASICs miner or 2 or 3 that are mounted on the back of this thing, and it just roams through the forest. I mean, like, it sounds super freaking out there. But
yeah,
everything we just talked about, I hope it's not too far of a jump to have this thing, out there and going. Obviously,
yeah.
One thing I would say, obviously, you'd have a fleet of them because one of them wouldn't make any sense. And that fleet would still be managed by some human which is watching it. And if one fell over or went down or whatever, you just chopper someone out there and, it gets fixed and off you go again.
Right. And like, yes, most forests, well, actually, I don't want to say most forests. The forests that I keep thinking about, the ones that are very, very dangerous, the ones that you see the majority of forest fires happen in, is in the western part of the United States. It's not flat. Yeah, there are some flat places that have forests, but in the great guts and feathers of the forest in the West, it's not flat. It's hard to walk. So when you're thinking about like, well, if I want a robot, a single unit that is autonomous, that can make sense of its surroundings and go and do stuff, what kind of robot am I looking for? And I really thought at the time, although there's other possibilities, but a quadruped, something like a horse, something like a cow, because this terrain is easily navigable by 4-legged animals. I'm like, okay, well, is there a 4-legged robot? Sure enough, there's that the what's called the legged squad system. What was it? Legged squad support system from Boston Dynamics, which I don't think Boston Dynamics actually exists anymore. I think they got bought out by somebody, and I cannot for the life of me remember who, but the team is still around. They're just working under a different name now. But they had this legged support system, which was a military construction. It was like DARPA and the Marine Corps, the Army, and Boston Dynamics all got together and said, we need something to support a military squad, something to carry extra ammo, extra water, maybe some, medical kits. And they came up with this four-legged construction that was able to navigate its own surroundings, could walk up and down hills, could be, at the time they tried to push it over. It was never able to get back up on its side, but I'm pretty sure everybody's seen the newer
Mm.
versions of Boston Dynamics robots where you can't even push them over anymore.
No, and just
So I'm looking at,
just to help you out here, it was Hyundai
yeah.
Motor Group. So listen to this.
Oh,
Hyundai bought it in
Hyundai, yeah.
2020. So Hyundai Motor Group acquired Boston Dynamics in 2020. The acquisition was completed, purchasing a controlling stake in the company. This acquisition was part of Hyundai's strategy to expand into the robotics and mobility sectors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
they are not going to stop making autonomous robots. This is like people that are upset with AI. Oh, it can't do anything, and it's just a bunch of hooey. And it's like, well, you can believe what you want, but it's not going away.
So what I
And you
see
can
here
either
with
choose
this,
to figure out a way to,
what I see here is you've got a
yeah,
motor company merging with a mobility company. It's everything
right.
that you're writing about. Again, this isn't sci-fi.
Yeah.
This is literally happening and has been happening for 5 years at this point.
Yeah, I figure if you can have a bipedal robot do a backflip and other, acrobatics, you can pick up a stick and throw it into a chipper. I'm sorry, this is at this point it is no longer rocket science. This can happen. And the thing about the Boston Dynamics, the legged support system, is that it's about the right size and was designed to carry about the right weight that I'm thinking of, except that 400 kilograms is going to need to be about like half a metric ton, but I just don't see that as being that much of an issue. The real issue is always going to be coming down to the energy budget. How much wood or how much energy does the wood that it picks up contain? How much of that can it pick up? How much of that can it process? How much of that can be gasified? How much of that is wasted or actually not wasted, but how much of a percentage of that can be converted into electron flow? It's all about the energy budget. Now, those numbers are, I'm not an engineer. And so those numbers are difficult for me to actually say, yes, it will work or no, it won't work. But that's where the budget, that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. Is there enough energy? So that's a question that I can't really answer right now. And I mean, I should be able to answer that, but I have to admit that I can't. So right now, because of that, this entire thing is sort of just a theory, right? I know it can be done. Is it going to be worth it to be done? But getting back to the Boston Dynamics thing, there's nothing about the system that can't happen. So what you've got is you got a quadruped that's about I'm thinking about half the size of one of those old Volkswagen Bugs. You remember the old ones?
Mm-hmm.
That is able to sense its terrain, keep its balance, identify particular sizes of branches, pick those up, like you said, throw them into a hopper, and that hopper leads to a chipper, and the chipper feeds the gasification process, and has to be continuous feed. So there's a lot of engineering problems that are here, but once they get solved, they can have applications into other issues. We already have continuous feed gasification units. We just need to make them smaller. right? And we somehow or another, like, these types of things, these types of inventions have this tendency to have knock-on effects in other industries. Like, why would anybody care about making a Honda generator that's a portable generator any lighter than it already is? You can move it around. It's okay. So we don't really have a reason to make it lighter, but this would be a reason that you would want to make it lighter. So all of a sudden, you might end up with extremely lightweight electric generators that provide a lot of power. I'm not saying it will be done, but I'm pretty sure that somebody brilliant, all they have to have is a reason to start looking further into a particular thing. And all of a sudden, like the space program gave us Velcro and integrated circuits. No, we didn't see that coming. We didn't see Velcro coming out of the space program in the United States, but yet we all know what Velcro is now, right? It's that same kind of thing. So while there are problems with this system, the way that I've defined it, those problems, I think, end up being particular places where somebody can go, I know how to make a ceramic, electric generator that will be 20% of the weight of a Honda generator and generate twice as much electricity. Who knows, right? So if you have all this combined, the ability to identify a fuel source, the ability to convert that fuel source into something usable, then produce electricity with it, then all of a sudden you have a singular thing that can just walk and walk and walk and walk and walk. And as long as there's sticks on the ground, there will always be fuel to feed it. So it's like, I think of it like a ruminant. It's like a cow.
Mm-hmm.
It just walks around and it converts all this stuff into energy. And I'm hoping that the excess energy is enough to drive 4 or 5 ASICs miners. And as the ASICs miners become more efficient and they use less and less electricity to generate more and more hash power, and the new Bitmain, was it the S23 liquid cooled, is like 9.5 joules per terahash. It's the most efficient miner that's ever been made. And we started out with miners that were like 1,000 joules per or 100 joules per terahash. And now we're down to like 9.5. How long has ASICs mining been around? Do the math. Where's this going to go? This is going to go to like 1 joule per terahash, half a joule per terahash. So all of a sudden, this thing becomes, over time, more and more likely that it's going to be able to hash quite a bit of actual, or provide quite a bit of hash power to either a pool or your own pool, or a bigger pool, like maybe ocean mining or something like that. And that was the whole thing, is that without the Bitcoin mining aspect, I kind of wouldn't have ever gone this way with this thinking. It was like the question becomes, how can you use, what happens when you plug Bitcoin mining into something? In this case, it's like, what happens when you plug Bitcoin mining into forest management and fire mitigation? At first glance, those two things do not mix. But if you can say, okay, well, here's enough of a reason to build the rest of this system, and all of a sudden you get fire mitigation management, forest fuel load management, it all drops out simply because you plug Bitcoin mining into something that at the surface doesn't make sense. Bitcoin mining and forest management, that doesn't make sense.
I love it.
But now it does. It's like, what else is out there that you can plug Bitcoin into that you wouldn't think Bitcoin has anything to do with? And all of a sudden, some idiot somewhere is writing a huge paper on something else that's science fiction, right? So when I look at the system, I keep thinking, okay, you got one, and if I'm just like letting it walk around and it just keeps migrating. It keeps just walking forward. It will basically take care of a swath around it. And that little swath is going to be pretty much fire safe. But that's just this little swath. So you need more than one. And that's where the rest of the system starts coming in, and where things get really, really funky is when you got 50, but I'm thinking it's more like 500 to 5,000. Like, I'm talking about herds roaming around and completely cleaning up entire valleys. And all you have to do is say there's two things about Bitcoin here that come into play when I think about this. Is one is the Bitcoin mining aspect. If you're gonna be out there doing this and harvesting this fuel for Bitcoin mining, what else can you do with it? And then the obvious thing is forest fire mitigation. That's worth a lot. Even if Bitcoin mining wasn't involved, that's worth a lot. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year in damages because of forest fires. All you have to do is make sure there's no fuel. Well, nobody's going to pay anybody to go into a forest and pick up sticks. This thing pays for itself, or at least that's the theory. Even if I can get it to just pay for itself, it mines only enough Bitcoin that it only pays for its own maintenance and its own reason for being. There are other revenue models that you can wrap around this that might make money, which we haven't even touched on at this point, but it's in the paper.
So, and to think as well, a lot of people think, well, how would you even think about deploying this? I mean, in your mind's eye, how many of these things could you get in one shipping container?
In one shipping container, like 20.
Right. So you need 10 trucks, and you got 200 of these things. You drive along in convoy alongside the side of the forest, and you deploy them, and off they go, roaming on into the forest. And they'll have a set geographical kind of GPS thing downloaded where they need to go looking.
Right.
Maybe they've even got a set timer, at X time, at X amount of days, shut down. They can set, well, they'll be able to track them all the time anyway, because they will be fitted with Starlink and GPS, because they need the Wi-Fi to be able to, enter into the Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, there's and there is just as many problems with the system as there are as it presents solutions. Actually, I think there's more problems. Like, one is out in the wilderness, there's no cell towers. That's why you get Starlink, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to coordinate all of these things. They're all coordinated together with their hashing power. This is just for the Bitcoin mining part of it. There's no such thing as uplink to the Blockstream satellite, as far as I know. You only get downlink, which means that if you're out there in the middle of the wilderness, you're not actually mining Bitcoin, because you can't get your mined block data back. You can mine it. You'll know what the block data is coming down, but you'll never be able to transmit back to the network that you found the block. So it's a non-starter right there, right? Unless Blockstream figures out a way to get telemetry back up from the ground for the block data, this is a problem, right? So what to do? Well, this is one of the other revenue models that comes in, right? It's like, there are towns that don't want to burn down, and they're in the mountains. They're in heavy forest. There's, villages in all over like the United States that are like in danger of burning straight down to the ground. And many of them have, right? What would it be worth to that municipality to have a fleet of these cleaning up around the town where there is cell phone access, and the Bitcoin mining data can be uploaded to the blockchain, right? That's where you start. To me, that seems like that's where it starts. The problem, there's a thing about permaculture that says the problem is the solution. What's the problem? I can't I can't just go out into the middle of the wilderness and mine Bitcoin because I can't get the data back up to the blockchain. Presents a solution. What else is in danger other than the wilderness? The townships that are in the wilderness. So you start by talking to the town councils, to the mayors, to the people that really don't want to have their places burned down. And then at that point, you can start saying, okay, well, the county fire department, how much money do they spend if they have to go and save this town from burning down? They're not even really wasting their energy on trying to put out the fire in the forest. They're just making sure that the structures don't burn down. How much is it worth to them? Like, at what point can you generate revenue by going into even the smallest of townships without breaking their bank, without just, destroying them financially, and saying, you let us use, the Wi-Fi and the cell phone towers around here, and your town will not burn down. It'll be fire safe from here to, like, 10-mile radius, and nothing's going to be able to burn because there's just no fuel. And like I said, mature trees are really hard to ignite. The only way it really occurs is if there's that much fuel load on the ground, which won't be there, right? And all we have to do is pick up sticks about yay big.
Mm.
I'm not even talking about the logs.
No.
Because it's that kindling that starts up, and then it gets hot enough to burn the logs on the ground. And then that gets hot enough to start igniting the rest of the conflagration. You get the kindling out, it's going to be almost near impossible to ignite that thing on fire. So now you've got at least one problem potentially solved by using this as a way to clean up around towns that are in danger of being burnt to the ground, like Palisades. And that was a whole neighborhood, not even really a town, right?
That's the one example that keeps popping up in my mind. I mean, how much is it worth to those people to have had like 200 of these things roaming around the forests that are up in the mountains there, just cleaning away all of that kindling, all of that tinder.
Right.
And another thing you point out in the article as well is there used to be large animals living around in these forests, and they would break off the lower hanging dead limbs, right? And this is where the problem. I learned this from reading your essay. The fire starts, all the kindling, all the tinder, that sparks, then slightly bigger logs, then you get the fallen trunks and the bigger branches.
Mm-hmm.
That creates an even bigger problem. But then the fire jumps, and the only reason it jumps is because the lower hanging dead limbs that haven't been knocked off by the larger roaming animals that would have been around back in the day,
Right.
They catch, and then you've got what did you call it? Like a ladder fire or something?
Yeah, it's called laddering.
Right.
And laddering comes from the word ladder, like you're just climbing up something because you have rungs. And it's the best description of how a fire gets from the ground into the tree crown, which is where all the foliage is, right? So yes, if I were to walk, and I do this, I go on hikes with my children to a place called Moscow Mountain in western Idaho all the time. And it is frightening how much fuel load there is there. But it's also more frightening when I look at the cedar and the hemlock and the pine trees that are there, because it's essentially a hemlock cedar pine forest out here. And the length, the diameter, and the sheer number of branches that are dead, that are hanging onto trees, that go all the way to the ground and all the way up to the living part of the tree, that's the frightening part. Because they're dead and they're dry. And if they catch on fire, that's going to catch fire on the branch above it. And then that's going to catch fire to the branch above it because heat rises. And then that entire base of that tree is going to be in flames.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to cook the pine needles, or hemlock needles, or whatever it is. The living part of that, the water in that living mass is going to start to boil out, and it's going to gasify. And what happens with gasified shit? It catches on fire, and you get what's called a crown fire. And then the crown fire is up there burning next to other crowns. So now you've got a fire that went from the ground and migrated up through the base of the tree. Now it's at the top of the tree. So from the ground to the top of the forest is all on fire. The amount of heat you're talking about is beyond imagination.
And then
This
you
is the
add a
kind of
little.
heat. Well, this is
Add
the kind of heat they talk about that causes its own weather patterns.
Yeah, I was going to say add a little wind to that crown fire, and
Right. So what you're talking about in that paper was where I talk about, let me see if I can find it. Do. Shipper. I'm almost there, Daniel. Hold on. Wait. I'm almost there. Branch drones. There we go. Let's see here.
branch drones. Yeah,
Yeah.
these are the flying ones. These are cool.
Yeah. And they don't have to be flying. It's like, it's one of those things where a lot of the stuff that I wrote down was like, I got to get this down.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a drone that just crawls up the side of the tree. It doesn't have to fly, although it'd be kind of cool if it did, because when think about the scene in the forest of a bunch like a air swarm of things with like rotating blades on it. Yeah, it's sort of, that's an effective scene, an effective mental scene, but it doesn't have to be that way. The point is that you need something to cut these branches all the way up to about 10 to 15 feet above the ground, because that's pretty much as high as the woolly mammoth was. So we had in the United States, or let's call it Central to North America, right? So from at least Mexico, which is North America, all the way up through Canada. Not sure about South America or Central America. We had great big animals like giant beavers. And people go, oh, well, cute. A great big dog like beaver. No, talking about an 8 foot tall beaver. It's a beaver. It's not like kind of like a beaver. It's a beaver. They made dams. They made great big dams because you're talking about an 8 foot beaver, right? It's going to be going through the forest, and an 8 foot tall individual weighing something like close to 700 pounds. It's not like us hitting a stick when we walk by a tree. Ow, ow. We'll shy away from it because our skin is sensitive and we're not covered with greasy fur. A beaver is going to act differently. It's going to have to be a great big stick for the beaver to go, ow, and not want to break it off. But you got other stuff like I got a list here, mastodons. Pretty sure they're not going to care. I mean, you're talking about like a 15-foot elephant covered with hair. When it's crashing through the forest and it scrapes by a tree, it's going to break a limb off of it, and it probably doesn't care. Probably just doesn't care. It's when we look at what the energy it would take for us as humans to break some of these things off a tree, we think that when we walk through a forest nowadays and we see all these dead branches hanging off of it, that's normal. It's not, because the context isn't there. The ancient context of mastodons walking around the forest isn't present. But if it was, it would be almost instantly easy to see that those dead branches around the tree, that shit shouldn't be there. That's wrong. If you go into a forest and you see dead branches from the living part of the tree all the way down to the ground, it should scream at your soul, there's something wrong here. This is not right. But you had mastodons as well as woolly mammoths, right? You had rhinos. A lot of people don't know that. Rhinoceroses were here. And these are armored animals that barely feel. You have to have a special kind of gun to penetrate the skin of a rhino. These are hardy animals. And you had short-faced bears, which ate humans, by the way. They were a predator of early humans. Yeah. I mean, they were not just here. They were in like a lot of different places, but you had things called steppe bison, which were like large buffalo. You had caribou, you had muskox, you had giant beavers, you even had camels. We had camels in North America. We had gigantic ground dwelling sloths. Like, have you ever seen the three-toed sloth? Mm-hmm. Think about one that's about 10 foot tall.
Yeah.
Right. You had glyptodons, which are giant armadillos. And again, we're talking about a 6 foot tall. Well, it's not. They don't stand up. I mean, an armadillo is like quadruped, but it's just like if you've ever seen an armadillo, just think of it as instead of something about, you know, yay
Mm-hmm.
big, think of it as something that's about, you know, probably 10 foot long and 6 foot at the top of its armored dome. Just crawling around, breaking stuff off of the base of the trees. And then you had oh, I love this one. Dire wolves. I used to think that was just a Dungeons and Dragons thing. No, a giant wolf. I mean, talking about like a very large wolf, like something like 5 times the size of a wolf today. All of these were made extinct by the early Americans. They came over the land bridge in the Bering Strait, and they came down through North America because they were coming out of Asia, coming out of Russia, come over the Bering because there was like there was an ice age at the time about 15,000 years ago or 18,000 years ago. They come over there, they come down, and they hunt all this shit to extinction. By the time the Europeans got here, there the only thing that was left was a giant beaver, and there was barely any of those.
Yeah, to
All
put
the
this
rest of
into
this,
perspective, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, he's talking about dinosaur times, but no, we're talking about the Pleistocene epoch, because I've got it now on Venice AI, thank you,
right?
which ended 11,700 years ago, which
Mm-hmm.
transitioned into the Holocene epoch, which is the current geological epoch. So
Right.
this was yesterday, guys. Like,
Yeah. In geological times, this was last week. you know, and they were all gone. And the Native Americans, at that, I guess at the time they would have no longer been the newcomers or the new arrivals to the Americas, but they were the ones that populated this hemisphere because they got over the land bridge because it just happened to be frozen solid, and then it melted, so they couldn't go home. But by that time, they were just hunting parties, so they were just humans migrated too, right? But they certainly couldn't migrate back, so they were holed up here, and it became evident that they were going to have to take over all the forest management duties because they had killed all the forest management. Forest management has to be performed by a living thing, right? And you either are going to find a living creature that manages something for you, or you're going to have to manage that thing yourself. So these guys were like, okay, so they would be the ones, and they started managing the forest. The early Americans started managing forests with fire. Early Australians did the exact same thing, right? Fire is a great management tool, and they burned and burned and burned and burned. They burned everything everywhere that they could. And the forest looked like a giant park. There was no bushes, it was just grassland under trees.
Mm-hmm.
Does not look that way anymore. The way our forests look, like if I were to show you pictures of some of these particular places that I'm thinking of in my mind at Moscow Mountain, it starts to look a little sinister. And I believe in my heart, I believe there's a reason for that. I think nature is like, I'm going to broadcast to anybody who will listen to me that there's something wrong here, and that maybe you should either get away or you should fix it. And the Native Americans chose to fix it, and they would just set everything on fire. And that was only because they had to take over the management duties of the animals that they had killed. Otherwise, these giant animals would be taking care of all these branches on the sides of these trees up to about 15 feet, which is more than enough to break the link between ground fires and crown fires.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not going to set these for it, and now we've tried in the United States, the Department of the Interior and the Forest Service keeps trying to bring back controlled burns. It's impossible. There's too much fuel. Every time they set one on fire, it becomes a problem. You have to have something that is a very low cost system to go through and get rid of this shit. Hence the forest walker. And I just happen to be able to mine Bitcoin with it.
The forest walker or the flying drones, or both. Like,
All of them, all
yeah.
of them, because it's like if the flying drones identify the branch, cut it off at the
Mhm.
trunk.
Mhm.
It says this is a dead branch. This is easily done. You
And
know
remind me. I think it's cool because I think you even had like there'd be a landing station on the back of the walker where the drone could go back and recharge and
right,
take a rest, recharge its
right.
battery, and then go out and be like the forerunner, right? You go and you buzz all the dead branches off and create the fuel. So
Yeah, because
no
you're
more
like the
ladder
forest
fires.
walk. Yeah, the forest walker is picking up branches anyway at about a certain size, right?
Mhm.
These things are cutting off branches about that size. The forest walker is just going to see it as a branch laying on the ground. I don't even have to coordinate communications between the branch drones and the forest walker to say, hey, I've just cut down a branch. Forest walker doesn't give a shit. It just says, branch must eat. That's its instruction set, right? That I don't there's no coordination there. It just these things just keep dropping the branches down in the relative vicinity of these things. And these forest walkers will, like, the visualization systems will pick it up and say, branch, that looks like a branch. I'll bet you that's a branch. Why don't you go over there and see if that's a branch? And all of a sudden, the closer it gets, it says, yep, that's wood. Shove it in the hopper. It's taken care of. So now we've got clean trunks to 15 feet high taking over the management duties of the steppe faced bear or the steppe bison and the short faced bear and the rhinos and the mammoths and the elk and the caribou and all these other critters that we don't have anymore.
Man, it's so cool. I love it.
Well, there's problems though, like snow. Does
Hmm.
this work in the snow? I no, probably not. And it's like, well, if you're able to keep enough energy up, couldn't you have like hot, heat blowers that melt the snow?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Whilst they're looking for the fuel, right?
Right. But the answer would be no, because if you've ever tried to melt snow with a hair dryer, you realize it's a dumb idea because snow insulates itself. It's a no-go.
No.
So there's a problem. And let's say that it's springtime in the forest. Lots of rain in some places. Wet wood doesn't burn very well, and it certainly doesn't gasify very well. What do you do then? These are issues that I have yet to solve. The snow one is actually easy. You just say, look, I got 5,000 of these critters in a herd. There's no reason they can't be migratory. There's no reason that you just say, by the time into September, early October comes in these western states of the United States, we start seeing the first snow. You guys should be down in New Mexico at this point.
Hmm.
You guys should be down in Texas where you're clearing mesquite trees, not in forests, but on, ranchers' pastures, because those mesquite trees are invasive. They're not even really supposed to be in Texas. You could use that entire system to clear ranchers' land for them, which they would pay handsomely for because they do. Except they pay people that are using an awful lot of human capital to be able to do it. It's a lot of work to pull one of these things out of the ground. But if I've got 5,000 things that know how to butcher small trees and turn it into fuel, well, I've got a place for these things to do their work in the winter while the snows in the mountains are doing their thing, and then I can just migrate back up. And the problem with migration is that there's a lot of fences between those states. So do I put them on trucks? How much does that cost? You know, how if I can't just let them walk over the landscape like a herd of cattle in the old days, how do I get them from place to place? This is a problem, right? Um, there's always the problem of the fact that I don't quite know how much like a cubic centimeter, let's call it a cubic meter, right? I still don't know because it's almost impossible to get credible details how much energy I can produce out of a cubic meter of wood. And when I mean energy produced, I mean after it's chipped, how much energy did that cost?
Mm-hmm.
Put it in the gasification, how much syngas did it create? How much energy value does that gas have? And how many electrons can I spin up from that gas?
And it'd be
Those
different for
questions,
each. It'd be different for each wood, right?
each wood, not only each wood, but each moisture content,
Yeah.
because there's going to be different moisture contents. These are real issues that it's like, when I've talked to a couple of people about it, they're like, "Oh man, this is going to be great," and I'm like, "Not so fast." There's real engineering and real ecological issues that would have to be solved. Plus, what's a general return on investment for anybody that's going to develop something like this? Because at this point, I'm out of my depth. I'm not a roboticist. I can't code myself out of a wet paper bag with holes in it. I'm not a visualization specialist when it comes to how do you like actually get a LiDAR system to talk to a machine learning system that says, yeah, that looks like a wood branch. Those are specialists. You have to hire those people and they don't come cheap,
Mm.
right? So, the possibility of this actually ever happening, while possible, I guess the real question is it probable? And that's the rest of the equation. I mean, everything about this is completely doable. It's the return on investment. And that investment can simply be, how much do we not have to spend on rebuilding this town because it burnt to the ground? That's a credible part of the equation, but all of it has to actually be packaged up as a business plan, presented to anybody that would even potentially invest in it. And at that point, everybody has to answer for, well, what if it snows? What if it rains?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to move these? How much is it going to cost? And you brought up maintenance, which is one of my favorite parts of the system, because what would it be like to have a job where all you did was basically you're a shepherd, you're a mechanic, but you stay out with that herd. You camp in the woods all the time. Maybe you're fishing, maybe you're hunting, and then you get like a little beep on your phone that says, "Oh, Unit 56 is down." Okay. I mean, I could see that as an actual profession that people would be dying to do, to just be in the woods for a year, right? Or like, from let's say like May to, late October,
Mm-hmm.
and then have to, bring them somewhere else. I could actually see somebody going, oh, hell yes, especially if the pay was decent. And if the system actually kind of creates the kind of money that I think it could create because of these other revenue streams other than Bitcoin, that could be possible. Because we haven't even touched on the biochar generation, the wood vinegar generation,
The wood
the
vinegar,
amount.
yeah, this is what I wanted. I wanted to touch on that because it's a fun one. Because what's the byproduct? Wood vinegar,
Yeah.
right? So wood vinegar
Well,
is one of the byproducts. So you've got these great big giant robot things walking around, literally pissing vinegar,
yep.
into the forest. So
Yes.
explain that.
Um, there are two byproducts. Well, actually, there's several byproducts. There's heat, there's noise. That's an issue. That's
Mhm.
another problem. There's Bitcoin, because you're mining it. There's electricity, because you need that. There's syngas, and um, yeah, that's pretty much about it. So you get, at the end of the gasification process, what you're trying to do is not burn the wood down to ash. All you want is the volatile chemistries coming out of it. That's the gas, right? Like if I heat up wood, like I was telling you and Lauren, to like 400 degrees Celsius to 600 degrees Celsius, after a while, the only thing I'm going to be left with is very light charcoal. And we call that biochar. It's not like anywhere between 85% and 95% pure carbon. It is not the kind of charcoal you would want to use to bake hamburgers or hot dogs with. You don't want to put it on your grill. It would burn up too fast. The charcoal that you get at the store that you put on grills has a lot of volatile chemistry still left in it. That's what you're burning when you're burning charcoal. This stuff, you don't want to burn it. You want to put it into the ground because it does all kinds of fascinating stuff. The other byproduct is this stuff called wood vinegar, which is just condensed wood smoke. And if anybody, like, especially in the United States, not sure about the UK or any other place in Europe, there's this stuff called liquid smoke. And if you can get that in the store, what you're essentially buying is wood vinegar. It's just condensed smoke. And you would think that it would be like, I'm not eating that. Why, when you find out that liquid smoke is condensed actual smoke, you're like, isn't that cancer causing? That was literally my first reaction because I'm like, this has got to be carcinogens. There's got to be a bunch of carcinogens in this. Lots of organic chemistry always raises red flags for me as to, well, what kind of organic chemistries? Because some of these are not so good for you, like phenol. You don't want that on your skin, but that's organic chemistry. Just because it's organic chemistry doesn't mean that it's good for you chemistry. So when I started looking at the wood vinegar aspect of the gasification process, I was going, this can't be good for you. I can't believe I ever used liquid smoke before. And it turns out it's actually really good for humans, both ingestion, because it solves lots of digestive problems. We don't have time to get into how. Just go look at it for yourself. For any of your listeners out there, you just gonna have to go look at it for yourself. But look at, like, use the term wood vinegar, not liquid smoke. But it's also good as topical skin treatments for various things on humans and other mammals. But where it really lights itself up on fire is, again, like biochar, when you put it into the soil. It's a growth hormone regulator. It promotes growth. It promotes seeds to actually germinate. It promotes roots to grow longer. It promotes roots to actually not just longer and not just stronger, but more of them, like more roots. This stuff it's amazing when you drench soil with it. And my thing is that I'm a big biochar nerd. I've been studying this stuff for like a long time. And there's so much about biochar that, again, we don't have time. But essentially, you can think of it as a coral reef for your soil, especially in soils that are really bad and degraded. And if you know what a coral reef is, you know that it is teeming with life out in the middle of barrens, right? So like in the ocean, there can be nothing around but sand on the seafloor for miles and no fish because there's nothing there. It's like a desert in the ocean. But you see a coral reef and you have millions of fish, thousands of different kinds of fish. You have thousands of different kinds of coral. Why? They're all in this community. There's a food web there. There's things that are dying and things that are being born and things that are feeding on the dying, things that are predating each other because they're all in this community. And biochar does the exact same thing to soil. So if you think of soil as ocean and not as soil, and you put biochar into that soil, it has the same effect. It provides a home for millions of creatures, fungus and bacteria of all kinds, little critters. I mean, it becomes a home, and it also is sticky to water. And that's an important part about the biochar issue, is that it not only adsorbs 7 times its weight in water, it chemically holds it. It's not like a sponge where you can get a sponge wet and throw it out in the sun and come back an hour later and it's dry as a bone. That's a different kind. That's absorption. Absorption is different than AD, as in David, adsorption. Adsorption is more chemical. It's sticky. And water and other positive stuff like nitrogen which is fertilizer, and phosphorus, which plants need. Almost every micro and macronutrient and water that plants need, they're all positively charged, and they all stick to the surface of biochar. Now, you combine the ability for it to hold on to nutrients and water and become a coral reef for fungus and bacteria, and all of a sudden it becomes the most amazing soil amendment that you can ever put into your soil. You add wood vinegar to that and have its ability to boost plant growth and biochar's ability to hold on to the chemistries of the wood vinegar. You've got a very powerful combination. And it so happens that, like a ruminant that eats grass and poops out, like manure and urinates, the forest walker does the exact same thing, only the chemistry is slightly different. It grazes on wood, which no mammal can. This is the only thing that could actually do this. It harvests all the energy out of it, and its waste product, both of them, are intensely good for the soil, especially the biochar, which holds on to water. Now, I've talked about all the other stuff that it does, but I kind of think that, especially in drought-stricken areas, the most important part is the water holding capacity, because the plants have to actively harvest the water from the biochar. That's how sticky that water is. But the water's there, which means that if it doesn't rain for like a year and you've got enough carbon in your soil, you don't care. Whereas anybody else would be like freaking out. If it doesn't rain for a year on your pastures and you're a rancher, you're in trouble, bad trouble. But if you've got enough carbon in your soil and it's holding on to all the water that it ever rained on it and didn't let it escape off the land, you're in a much better position. So if there's a couple of ways to think about the biochar from the forest walker, do we just drop it right in the forest and let it do like at one point or another, all the soil critters are going to churn it into the soil? I don't really have to do anything. The fact that it's so low to the ground, it's not really going to catch on fire either. That's not a bad, and then just, have the forest walker pee the wood vinegar on it. Okay. That's a way to eject all the mass out of the burn chamber, and it's good for the soil. It's going to be good for the forest. Or is there another robot that goes around and harvests all that stuff for it, brings it back up to the road, puts it onto a truck, and puts it, sends the truck down to the shipping center where we bag it and bottle it and then sell it as a soil amendment for gardeners in cities? I don't know. That's a revenue stream. People actually, and here's the other thing that goes along with the biochar aspect is the carbon credit. And as much as people cringe, and I do too, believe me, it's like, man, I got to the point where I didn't want to hear about being taxed for my breathing.
Right.
And I know you guys are in the shit over there at the UK for that.
Mm-hmm.
Not so bad as the rest of the Europe or as the European Union. But if y'all had not got out of the European Union, you probably would be, because it's insane, right?
Carbon credits, yeah, ridiculous.
But if I'm provably creating carbon, or not creating carbon, but harvesting carbon, and I'm provably putting it into the ground, and we know that once it's in the ground, it lasts for anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000 years. It doesn't go, that carbon is never returned to the atmosphere. And if these people are going to bitch and moan to the point that they literally want to tax people and install this carbon credit scheme that I can literally trade carbon in the market, I'm not going to leave that money on the table. I'm going to have a tally of the amount of sheer tonnage of carbon that I'm responsible for putting back into the soil. And I'm going to say, I'm going to sell those carbon credits to the open market, saying that this year I've put 270 tons of carbon, pure carbon, which is, you multiply that by, I think it's either 2.3 or 3.3, and that's the carbon dioxide equivalent that you've sequestered permanently. At this point, I've seen numbers of $70 to $100 per ton as a carbon credit. When you start looking at numbers like 270, like a quarter of a million tons per year on a system like this, which could be done, all of a sudden those numbers, I don't sneeze at those numbers. And again, this is more of an issue for the European Union than it is the United States. But if the European Union wants to give me their money because I can prove to them that I put this carbon in the
Yeah,
soil,
you get
I'm going to
subsidies.
do it.
You get subsidies from them for creating a carbon capture scheme management program.
Right.
See, every time you plug Bitcoin into something, it turns Clown World on its head.
Clown World hates Bitcoin because it solves a lot of problems.
Mm.
And what I really wanted for this is for the Forest Walker was not as much to say, I'm going to go out and find an investor and I'm going to get them to spend $1 billion. That's not really the point. The point is, what else can we come up with? Sure, this is crazy as shit. I don't even care if people just call me flat, straight up psycho at this point, because it's like there's nothing about this that you can pull apart and say sucks other than nobody's going to build it. Fine. What else can be built?
And to your point, like they're the ruminants that are pooping and weeing on the soil. And so the way what something struck a chord with me earlier, you're talking about, well, what if it gets wet and what if it snows and whatever else? So you can do seasons, right? So, but what you're doing is you're replenishing that soil. So when it does rain or when it does snow over, and when the spring comes, the fungi have a place now to move in on. And you are completely transforming that forest. You're literally giving it back to the fungi to do their business, which they weren't able to do before because it was a desert. And
Well, I will say this, even in the driest of forests, the fungi is there. You don't have to worry about that. It wouldn't be a forest if it wasn't. Trees have to have fungal activity. If there's no okay, I love this one. I wish Lauren was here for this one. You can tell just by sight, without a microscope, without a test kit, without anything but your own eyeballs, you can tell whether the soil has more bacteria than fungi or more fungi than bacteria. If I go and look at somebody, if I'm looking at somebody's lawn, bacteria. If I'm looking at somebody's forest or a shit ton of trees in their backyard, that's fungus. If there's no trees, it's bacterial dominated. If there's a shitload of trees, it's fungal dominated. It's like, so if you walk into any forest, dry, wet, snow, spring, summer, the fungus is there. You don't have to worry about that. What we do have to worry about is conventional farming that has completely destroyed. When I say that there's no fungus in a farm field because there's no trees, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's way more bacteria than there is fungus, but you still need the fungus. With chemical, conventional agriculture, we've destroyed everything. The soil is sterile, right? So people that are trying to put pastures that used to be old hay fields, build old hay fields back or old pastures back, they don't have carbon in the soil because it's all been wrung out of it, right? There's definitely not as much fungus as needs to be there for good grass growth. So again, if I'm harvesting out in Southwest Colorado and I've got a fleet of I've got a fleet of forest walkers in Southwest Colorado, and instead of dropping it in the forest, I collect it and then I bag it and I start selling it to farmers so that they can, like the farmers that start to understand and more are starting to come into regenerative agriculture, more and more are stopping believing what their seed sales guy and their chemical ad sales guy says to them, because they're starting to listen to people like Gabe Brown. They're starting to listen to people like I can't remember the gentleman's name that owns White Oak Pastures out in Georgia. There's all these people there. They stopped using chemistries of all kinds years ago. Their operations make tons of money. They have almost no input costs. It's management. It's all about management. So now when there are farmers that are like, we've got to get carbon back in the soil. I got bags of this shit that I've already made money on selling it to the fucking EU. And I'm going to sell it the same shit to you for $10 for a 50-pound bag or whatever it is, whatever cost it is that makes it sensible for a farmer to say, yeah, I'll pay that. For what it does, I will pay that. I go, I don't care if it's $5 on 50. I've already made my money from the EU. I've already made my money from the suits on Wall Street trading carbon. I've I'm done. I'm done. I don't need this shit. I don't need to bilk the farmer who doesn't have that much money because they're trying to convert over to regen ag. I don't need to bilk him. I I've already made the money from the people that I think deserve to be bilked. Right? So I might even be able to offer it for free. I don't know. I haven't run those numbers.
And the Bitcoin you
They'll-
stacked
Maybe.
from
I
the
mean,
forest walkers, right? Like there's the other thing.
maybe. See, that's the thing is that the real problem with the forest walker is what hasn't been done. And that's a full-scale audit of the numbers. How much wood, how much electrons, how much Bitcoin, how much carbon credit, how much can I sell liquid smoke for, and to who? Is there there is a market. How do I tap it? That's a marketing question. I can't market. I'm like, my marketing is the same as my computer coding. I can't do it. I suck at it. Some people are like, they're just born with marketing and they go, how do you not know how to do this? I don't know how to do this. Okay. That's why my podcast is like the least amount of listeners of all the Bitcoin podcasts, because I don't know how to market my way out of a paper bag. And it ain't going to change anytime soon with this. But the last question, for the forest walker is a full audit. What are the numbers? That hasn't been done. I mean, I know how to approach it, but I look at it and go, oh God, what a mess I've made for myself.
But that's the point of this podcast. Let's pass it off to somebody that does have that skill set. And this is the beauty of the Bitcoin ecosystem, whatever we
Yeah.
want to call it, movement, that somebody listening to this right now who will go and read your article and they will go and see the pictures and they'll, they will get inspired. They will start writing up a spreadsheet and just throwing numbers at it and seeing what sticks and then having further discussions. I hope, because maybe, yeah. So the final point as well, it might not be the final point because this just touches everything. Data harvesting is another thing that you can offer here, because you can be taking samples of the soil with, like you say in the article, they're quadrupeds, right? There's 4 points of contact to the soil, which could be collecting data, analyzing it. So do you want to talk about that? And
Yeah, that's the data harvesting is one of the other revenue models that we've got. And if I were to attach a pH sensor, and there are some good ones, and I attach it on just 1 foot of every one out of every 10 of 5,000 walkers in a forest, I get a soil pH map. What's that worth to the United States Department of Agriculture when I've done 1,000 square miles? 1,000 square mile pH soil map of the first 2 inches of soil. I don't know. And I asked the question, what is it worth? Because I actually don't know, but I got a suspicion that somebody would pay for that data to have pH data points every 10 meters for 1,000 square miles has never been done before, because nobody wants to pay for it. But my team's going to be out there anyway. I might as well collect the data.
Who else knows what else you'd find out there in these samples? What other
minerals? Well, the chemistry is a little bit harder to do than some of the other aspects. Like, for instance, how much board foot lumber do I have in this forest stand? Well, we already use, like in the United States, there's a company 8 miles away from me that flies drones over forest with LiDAR, and they scan the width and the length and the height of the tree, and they take it through a mathematical process which determines how much board foot of lumber is potential in that forest. And then so the way that this works is that a lumber company that has their own forest stand that they're about to harvest, or that they want to harvest, or they're just asking questions about this. Let's call it 100 acres, right? Let's call it 100 hectares, right? So about 250 acres over here. They want to know how much board foot lumber is in that stand. They want to know what that stand is worth. So they'll call this company and say, I will pay you $2,000 to fly your drone, do the calculations, and return to me within 10 to 20% accuracy how much board foot lumber I have in this forest. And that will help me understand whether or not I should harvest this part of the forest and turn it into lumber, or should I wait? And all the while, how much money am I going to get? This is standard operating procedure now in the United States. This isn't the only company that does this. Just so happens that one of the guys that works there happens to be on Nostr, and he's a Bitcoiner. And
Very cool.
And that's how I know about this particular company. But this isn't the only company. I'm out there with 5,000 of these things, and they're all like spread out, but they're all in the same area. They're all within sight of each other. They're all looking with LiDAR, which is the same instrumentation this drone uses, which means that I'm collecting this data at hyper accuracy, because I'm seeing not one side of the tree, but every single side of the tree from many, many different positions, all of them at once, because I'm just continuously collecting that data. So let's say that I'm not in a private stand. Let's say that I'm in federal land. Would it be worth something to the United States Department of Agriculture to find out how much that particular forest is potentially worth at an economic scale? Probably. Are they going to do it? No, because the cost alone of having a company that charges $200 or $2,000 for like a 100-acre scan, they're not going to pay for 10 million acres. But by the time I get done with maybe 5 seasons, I'm going to have that information. Why not package that up? Air temperature, humidity, CO2 readings. In fact, my favorite part of this is like, wait a minute, I could sit here and I could list every sensor that I could think of. But what about the sensors that I can't think of? Maybe I advertise the entire system to universities to say, how much will you pay us to put your sensors on this rig? We're going to be there anyway. If you want I don't know, like an infrared spectral analysis, I'm not going to put that on these things because I don't need them. But if you can find a place and your power budget is acceptable to me that doesn't interfere with my systems, shit, yeah, I'll mount them. You or we'll hang out with you and you can mount them. And then you can have the data. Here's how much I'm going to charge you. By the way, I keep a copy of the data. Sorry, but unless somebody says, well, then we're not doing business, and I might say, okay, that's fine, we won't. Or, okay, then you pay me more. Because I might be able to figure out something for myself for my own systems with infrared spectral data. I don't know. The point is, it's all the stuff that I can't list that can be powered by the system, as long as it doesn't interfere with the power budget of the system overall, is all potential revenue, either through straight up data sales or renting out my equipment so that you can put your own instrumentation on it. Like sort of like when we do space flights and we send up satellites, and like JPL has 4 instruments, but we're also got like the European Space Agency has another instrument, and they say, can we put this instrumentation on the satellite? And they work out a deal. It's the same shit, only here on Earth. That's the other. That's one of the other revenue models that I've thought about. And I think that the total stack of revenue models is. See this sensor. I'm looking at. Again. I'm looking at this article. Yeah, I don't actually have it. That was in an earlier version. But yeah, so LiDAR data, pH, soil moisture. Oh, cation exchange sensing. That one is really important to remember what I was saying about biochar being sticky.
Cation. This is spelled Cation.
Yeah,
What is that?
it is a positively charged is a positively charged atomic element like magnesium or a positively charged molecule like NH3 or like some kind of nitrogen compound. If it has a positive charge, it's a cation. If it has an overall negative charge, like chlorine, it's an anion. It's
Okay.
because chemistry, people don't get this. Chemistry is electrical. Everything's electrical.
Hmm.
It's all about electricity, right? So the cation exchange capacity of a soil, what that tells you is how easy is it for plants to get the positively charged micro and macronutrients that they need? Are they there? If you have a low cation exchange capacity in your soil, it's very difficult for plants to get what they need, no matter
Hmm.
what it is. If it's positively charged, they're going to have a tough time getting it. But if you have a very high cation exchange capacity in your soil, you're doing bangers. Yeah, your plants are going to be booming because they're going to be able to get the cation, the positively charged or cationic nutrients that they need. Biochar provides a scaffolding to create very, very highly cation exchange capacity soils, right? But if I were to make a map for, like, let's say that I'm out, let's say that it's in the middle of winter and I've had to take my entire herd and I bring them to Central Texas and I'm clearing out like a rancher's land. They're going to want to know how much pasture might they potentially be able to grow this year. I'm going to be able to tell them at least one part of that puzzle by handing them a cation exchange soil map, 10-meter to 5-meter resolution for their entire 40,000 acre ranch as I'm going clearing off the shit that they're paying me to clear off for in the first place. It's that ability to figure out, instead of just one thing I can make money on, what's another thing I can make money on when I'm going to be there anyway doing this other thing. And this system just seems to keep coming up with possibilities of, I will stick this on it or have it do this and not just this. And all of a sudden, it just keeps making sense to have systems like this. And if we were having this discussion 50 years ago, impossible. Today, oh, it's possible. It's just, is it economically beneficial to do so for the people that actually develop it? Again, that's the audit of the numbers, a full-blown business plan. I ain't got it. It would be a bear to do that. That's a PhD dissertation. That's the amount of information we're talking about right there. I don't want a PhD. I want to
Well,
start thinking about something else.
I'm just thinking back to our last conversation where I ended up talking with you about electroculture, and it's just you talking about cations now has just twigged it for me. It's the
Yep.
copper that is charging the soil around it with cations.
Well, it ends up because I started looking into the electroculture thing and I didn't get far because I didn't have to. It became very evident very quickly that these cats were basically, they were understanding what soil does and how plants interact with soil and nutrients long before they knew what they were actually thinking of. Like I said, all chemistry is electrical. This is growing a plant is like plugging in a light bulb and
Mhm.
nobody gets it. Whether it's positively charged water and negatively charged chloride atoms, ions in the soil, it's an electrical circuit. And anybody who thinks different does not understand how the shit works, which is most people, including me. I don't fully understand it. But we've been missing it for thousands of years, just straight up thousands of years. For the entire time that we've known what electricity is, we've been missing it. We are just now starting to understand what the hell soil is. And that's one of the reasons why I just can't stop thinking about it, because it's just every time I turn around, I run into something going, oh shit. Now that makes sense. The way fungus works, the way bacteria work. Bacteria and fungus, when I say that, magnesium and all these things are electrically charged, if you were to think that that doesn't hold true for the very fungus and the critters all the way up to higher mammals like us, our brains are electrical. The whole system, this is just a giant electric circuit, and the soil is just the circuit board. So when you brought the electrochemistry up to me, I started reading it and I go, oh, this makes so much sense now. So it's not that I stopped reading it because I got bored with it. I was like, it actually started making me think about all the rest of the stuff that I've read about soil.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch of stuff starts falling into place and starts making sense.
Even Tesla was like screwing light bulbs into the earth, right? And
Yeah, he
proving
was
that
he was.
crazy.
It
And
it's
we're sitting here using wires.
uh-huh. I it well, exactly. It's like, I kind of leave you with this. A long time ago, I was thinking about, and I wouldn't think about it anymore because the thought of genetically modified organisms kind of makes my skin crawl. But before it made my skin crawl, and I was kind of excited about them, and this was decades ago, I was like, well, what if I was able to redesign it like a plant leaf cell where the chlorophyll was somehow able to transport the electron directly down into, like, instead of using it to make its own ATP, I was able to harvest the electrons directly. Not all of them, otherwise the tree would die, but some of them. And somehow maybe if I grew the tree with, that there, like, it was able to place copper ions, like, and stack them close to each other, maybe I could create wires inside the tree, and then all of a sudden the electrons would have a way to flow out of the leaf and into the stem and down to the root, and maybe plug just a car battery into it. It's insane. And I really wouldn't want to waste any more energy thinking about how I would get that done, because again, I really don't like GMOs. There's something about playing with that kind of stuff that I
Mhm.
don't think we're ready for. But like I said, I'm like, well, it could work, because electron flow is electron flow. And if it's got a conductor to flow down, then it's collectible. If it's collectible, then I can use a tree to charge a battery. I mean, all of this, there's nothing out there that's not electrical, except maybe at the quantum level, in which case everything gets weird anyway, and I don't have to think about it.
So touch grass, people, or go and hug a tree. When was the last time you hugged a tree, Dave?
Oh, I don't know. I touch trees all the time. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to hug them, but um, did also for people that are about to touch grass, if you are lucky enough to go find a forest or even a woodland, go use your hand and dig up like the first couple of inches of soil and smell it. If it smells like rain or like a forest after the rain, that beautiful scent that you get with good earth, it's actually a chemistry. There's a chemical. The geosmins is, I think, the way that you pronounce it, and it's made by all manner of bacteria, but it's an antidepressant.
Hmm.
I'm not blowing smoke. It's an actual antidepressant. This has actually been studied. So the farther away we get from land, the less we put our hands into soil, the more and more disconnected we are from the earliest molecules that actually made us happy. I don't know what else to say about this.
Mhm.
I really I'm like, we have just fucked ourselves from beginning to end with this endless chase for what we think wealth is. And the entirety of just learning about Bitcoin, even if it were to go away tomorrow, if somebody just completely screwed it over, what it's brought in turning the way that I think about what this existence is indelible. It's forever. It's until the day I die. The Lambo is bullshit. It's poverty. The farm that everybody looks at and laughs at, all the Amish people, look how poor they are. They make their own clothes. I'm like, no, they're actually probably pretty wealthy. They're wealthy in a way that you don't understand because for some reason or another, you think that going and spending $100,000 gambling in Vegas is wealth. I don't. There was a time when I used to. I will never be able to see it that way ever again, and that causes problems when I'm having discussions with normal people.
Mhm.
I just want to run away and go, where are my Bitcoiners?
Yeah.
They get it.
100% agree with you. And anybody that's out there doing their gardening and planting their vegetables, do it bare hand. Take the gloves off. This is just the most basic thing you can do. When we were planting our little vegetable patch with the kids, I'm like, no, no gloves. Like, yeah, but
Yeah,
daddy, it's poo. I'm like, no, it's not. Just get in there. And
exactly.
it's like, it feels so good. It actually feels so good.
Good soil feels good. And it should
Mhm.
be like crumbly and like they call it chocolate cake. It should feel like you're putting your hands into the middle of a beautiful chocolate cake. And if you smell it, you're just getting infused with this aroma of these molecules. It's this molecule that um, actinomycetes is one of the main progenitors of this geosimins. I cannot pronounce it. These class of molecules that act as antidepressants. I it it works every single time. I go out into a forest. One of the very first things I do is the minute I get deep enough where I'm in full shade and I know there's a bunch of fungal activity in the soil, I'll just pick up a handful of soil and I'll just snort it. Not where the grains of soil are going up, but just smelling it. And within about 15 minutes, if I was feeling bad, it I all of a sudden I forget that I was feeling bad. It's one of the most, it's probably not a replacement for the severely depressed, but if you're not having a good day, go smell some soil, unless it smells sour, in which case you've got a problem with your soil. So
Mhm.
just be aware. Go find good soil, go smell it, dig in the dirt with your hands, walk around in grass bare feet. This is all electrical, and the forest walker is probably going to solve 80% of the world's problems. So
Love it. What a rip, mate. Almost 2 hours again, but we've
damn,
done it great justice.
damn.
Well, I don't. I'll ask you the question. I know I've asked you 2 or 3 times already, but if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
Uh, my daughter, she
Fair.
doesn't get it yet.
All right.
Somehow she is unconcerned about money, and I don't know how to change that. I'm working on it. But yes, my daughter.
All right. Well, I'd love to, meet you guys one day. That'll be amazing. If you're ever over in Europe, bring the family, come to a conference or whatever. And if we're in the States, we'll do the same. We'll hook up, and
I would love
that's a
that,
given.
Daniel. Yeah, I would absolutely love to do that.
All right, brother. Well, take care, and thank you again for coming on and for everything you're doing to educate people about Bitcoin and your own style. And I love this article, and I hope people reach out to you afterwards.
I hope so too. Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it.
See you, brother.
See you later, man.